Our workshop today deals with healthcare costs and the trends we're seeing in healthcare costs, trying to identify and narrow down the actual drivers of health insurance premiums as we move through the system this year.
What does the research show as far as why premiums cost what they do for health insurance?
In general, prices for different services in healthcare continuously go up, and our utilization of pharmaceuticals, of drugs, and the amount of money that they take of the premium dollar has increased dramatically in the last 10 or 15 years.
What would be a recommendation to reduce those costs?
Well, we have to get a handle and an understanding on how we can use the data about price and move it out into the marketplace and give people an opportunity to do their own shopping to an extent. You can't shop for everything. I'm most excited about artificial intelligence and machine learning, where we're gaining the ability to predict when people are going to need to go to the hospital before they actually arrive in the hospital. Gives us a window to intervene and to help them avoid that stay.
Our workshop today deals with a forecast for the individual market, both nationally and in Louisiana. This is important because the size of the market in Louisiana in particular has been shrinking. We see enrollment numbers going down, premiums have been fluctuating, so we're going to focus on what's causing that. Health insurance in Louisiana has been somewhat volatile. We have seen great improvements in the number of uninsureds in Louisiana. So the number of uninsureds in Louisiana is actually lower relative to the rest of the country now. But we're still seeing premiums going up, and we're seeing enrollment in the individual market going down.
What's your recommendation for Louisiana?
I think as Louisiana is addressing Medicaid fraud issues and people are going to be rolling off of the Medicaid enrollment, that we need to make sure that there's a way for them to move into the individual market, and there could be more coordination between Medicaid and the federal government and the state government, and then also the marketplaces.
Our workshop today deals with driving value in healthcare, and I'm going to talk about the evolution in alternative payment models. And this is important because this affects how healthcare is delivered and will ultimately end up in providing savings to our health systems across the country, as well as end up with improved patient healthcare and improved patient satisfaction.
What are the recommendations that you have for Louisiana?
To stay aware of what's happening, particularly for Medicare, and to educate yourself with what is coming down the road, because things continue to change. This is a moving market, and those practices and providers who are educated and aware of what's happening are the ones that are most prepared to be successful.
Our workshop today deals with the broad issue of certain reporting and reimbursement obligations to the Medicare program for insurance carriers and self-insureds in the workers' compensation or general liability space, and helping them to identify situations where they have exposure either from a reporting perspective or a reimbursement perspective, and providing some best practice tips for them how to minimize their exposure.
How does this impact those companies and their employees?
Well, it impacts these companies in a lot of different ways. Financially speaking, there's a lot of waste out there when it comes to these reimbursement and reporting issues. There is way too much overspending and over reimbursement back to the Medicare program, which has a material effect on the company's bottom line.
What recommendations do you have for Louisiana?
So for the state of Louisiana, identification of when these issues are front and center versus when the issue is back of the line, and understanding when and how to address them in the most efficient and economical manner possible.
Our workshop today deals with federal update. We're going to talk about association health plans, Medicare supplement plans, as well as long-term care insurance. In addition, I'm going to talk about health reimbursement arrangements. I'm going to talk about several updates in Washington. They're not bills, but rule changes that could impact insurance in Louisiana. So we're going to talk about updates on association health plans and expanding those plans to more employers, about Medicare supplement plans, who can enroll in which plans, and long-term care insurance, some of the challenges in the market and how that might impact Louisiana.
Give us an example on some of those regulations and what the bottom line could be if they are passed in their entirety.
Yeah, there's a regulation on health reimbursement arrangements that really could impact the individual market in Louisiana, could really increase its size, because it's going to allow employers to provide money for individuals to go to the individual market and buy coverage.
And what kind of an impact would that have?
it could really increase the size, which can increase the stability of the market when you have more lives covered. And if people have funds from their employer to do that, they're more likely to go into the individual market.
Our workshop today dealt with health clinics and how it can control costs. So we are a national company across the United States in 37 different states, and how it benefits it because it helps direct care in a more controlled manner and helps in turn reduce the cost of the health plan. It benefits the employee because it saves them on out-of-pocket costs. It also benefits the employer because it directs care to the most cost-effective quality service.
What kind of results have you seen so far?
Reduction in claims costs at least by the first year of 20%, as well as specialty referral down by 20%. So we look at the projection of what you typically see in the industry is on an incline, and we're able to reduce that trend.
Our workshop is going to cover Looker's work within the federal government to minimize fraud, waste, and abuse, specifically around Medicare and Medicaid claims to combat the opioid crisis. And I think everyone knows the severity of the issue. More deaths than car accidents, $100 billion in direct costs annually. So we're doing what we can with analytics to reduce that.
What are some of the most obvious cases of fraud that you've seen so far?
So some of the most egregious cases will be physicians who might be prescribing 4 or 5x the recommended dosage of morphine, and those ultimately lead to overdoses and deaths. It might be beneficiaries who are seeing as many as 10 doctors in a given period to shop around, and those ultimately have bad consequences for everyone.
What recommendations do you have for Louisiana?
Be more data-driven. You can detect fraud early, you can prevent deaths early if you use data the right way.
Our workshop today is about the real cost of insurance fraud, and we'll be discussing the fraud schemes that are very prevalent in the industry right now, as well as some information about the opioid crisis and how Blue Cross is addressing it. It really does affect everybody. At Blue Cross, our mission is to improve the health and lives of Louisianians, and fraud is really making an impact on the lives of Louisianians. Healthcare fraud is very prevalent. The opioid crisis is very prevalent, and Blue Cross is doing all that we can do to address those issues.
What is your advice on ways to reduce fraud?
Wow. So one of the big things that the public can do for us is to look at their explanation of benefits and report things to us that don't look right. Another thing that we can do, particularly our elderly population, is to make certain that any test that are done on you, or medications that you receive, equipment that you receive in the mail, make sure that that actually comes from your doctor and isn't coming from one of these scams.
Our workshop today dealt with a high-level view of social media as far as what are the technologies that social media venues use to develop their deliverables to their marketing, as well as some of the pitfalls you could run into using social media to investigate claims, but then also how to work ethics into your claims investigation and how social media can make this fairly complicated process much more time efficient and easy.
What recommendations do you have to eliminate fraud in the marketplace?
To look or to use social media in such a way that you're able to develop a baseline of your injured claimants, to demonstrate how they are coming in their medical recoveries, and to also argue that they've reached maximum medical improvement and are ready to resume their normal lives.
Our workshop deals with an overview of the vehicle crime and insurance fraud in Louisiana.
How serious is the problem?
Well, it's actually gotten better over the years. It's not quite as bad as it was 14 years ago when I was placed in this position, but there's still work to do.
What are the most common types of crimes?
Staged accidents, vehicle give-ups on owner thefts, theft and burns involving the policyholders. A lot of staged accident activity, especially with commercial motor vehicles, slip and fall rings, things of that nature.
What are the prevention tips that actually work?
Well, I would say educating the consumer as to what the problems are, not being enticed to seek medical treatment for non-existent injuries. Also, to make certain that you involve the police anytime you suspect that an accident may have been intentionally caused, or in cases of staged accidents where maybe you have knowledge that somebody has participated in that, just to don't overlook it, but report it.
Our workshop today dealt with insurance policy fraud fighting provisions, which includes requirements for sworn statements and proof of loss, examination under oath, and the appraisal provision.
How serious is the problem of insurance fraud in Louisiana?
It's quite prevalent, as a matter of fact, and unfortunately, especially in the homeowners market and the property world, everybody likes to ask for a little bit more maybe than they're entitled to. We have a bunch of public adjusters and other people that are involved in the industry in the claim side representing policyholders that feel that it's the best thing for their client to actually ask for more money than maybe they're entitled to, so that when the case ultimately gets settled, that they have a better return for their customers.
What does it take to reduce that fraud?
Using the provisions that are in the policy. So when you have a dispute as to the amount of the loss, sending it to appraisal rather than going to a lawsuit might be more efficient for both the policyholder and the insurance carrier, because it's a circumstance where that doesn't involve litigation, doesn't involve depositions, and gets money into the insured's hands faster.
Our workshop today is dealing with flood and essentially how the private market is entering the flood market in the state of Louisiana and throughout the United States, not just looking at the NFIP, but also beyond the NFIP.
What is the outlook for Louisiana?
It's fantastic. The take-up rate in Louisiana is really high when compared to other states, and companies are very aggressive in terms of being able to come into the state. Our goal is that all insureds essentially are able to have flood coverage at some point in time in the future.
What would encourage more people to get flood insurance?
At least from an NFIP standpoint, the take-up rate in Louisiana is 35%, more than any other state in the United States. In order for policyholders to get flood coverage, two things. One is essentially accessibility and ease of transaction. So if we can make flood available for them, the take-up rate would increase a lot.
That has been an issue in Congress in terms of renewing the NFIP. What is the outlook for the future?
NFIP is going through a couple of changes. So one, they're working with middlemen to be able to re-underwrite and re-rate their program. In addition to that, we're excited to see what will come from that. They will be an important player for the long run, and we've seen them as important for the last 50 years. We see them as important for going forward as well.
Our workshop today deals with commercial auto insurance and the things that are driving the costs up higher, and what we might be able to do to lower those costs for consumers.
What recommendations do you have for Louisiana?
Louisiana needs to make some significant changes in their legal system to deal with some of not only the fraud, but some of the trial lawyers who take advantage of the system to get large awards for their clients.
Give us an example of a Louisiana driver and a driver maybe in another state and the difference in what they pay.
For commercial auto, it can be significant. It can be as much as 2 times what is paid in other states. For example, in Louisiana, it's the second highest cost for auto insurance in the country, behind Nevada.
Our workshop today is going to be dealing with what are the hot topics for producers going on right now. What are the things that keep them up at night, basically.
What are some of those issues and how do they affect consumers?
Well, we represent the Property and Casualty Insurance Association, so for them, auto reform, tort reform to help with auto rates, that's a huge issue, as you know. It was dealt with last session, became a big issue for the election. And so that bill is going to be brought up again. Several variations of it will be brought up again, and so that's definitely one of the hot topics, is trying to get tort reform passed so that we can get insurance rates lowered.
What's your feeling regarding on how difficult that may be in this session of the legislature?
Well, we expect that we're going to still have challenges. We think the makeup of the committee that is involved with that looks better for us, but we, of course, definitely are going in expecting challenges.
Our workshop today was on risk data for property insurance, understanding what some of those data elements are and how they can help you write a better policy.
How can that benefit customers?
Well, there's two. The first is for the carrier and the underwriter to give a more accurate price for the location. The second is for the agent to give this data to their consumers and say, here's some of the risks around your property. You may want to take proactive steps to guard against those risks.
Our workshop today deals with travel insurance, specifically the Travel Insurance Model Act enacted by the NAIC and NCOIL a few years ago that's been rolled out in the states. Louisiana was the first state that, that enacted the model. And it's important because travel insurance is a growing industry. Over the last number of years, there's been travel insurance, there's been some questions about how travel insurance fits into the wider general regulatory framework. And so it's important that the new law get enacted, the new model get enacted so that it can be clarified in terms of applying to travel. And so today, it's important to talk about how this works and how the industry is growing.
What kind of an impact does that have for people and for companies?
It's critical for companies so that we're all on the same page with the regulators. I think the regulators and the folks in the industry that need to comply need to know what the rules of the road are. And so I think that's where this is really important going forward. Also, I think for the folks at large, it's really important because the Model Act and the Louisiana law does include a lot of consumer protections, a lot of disclosures that weren't in previous laws. So, so I think it's very helpful.
Is fraud an issue in this area?
I wouldn't say so. It's not something that's really come up in the debates so far.
Our workshop today deals with cyber risk and the things you need to know both as a business or organization in this new world where this is the prominent risk for facing industries, companies, and individuals today.
What recommendations do you have for Louisiana?
Common sense is probably the biggest one, and in specifically, individual responsibilities. So security awareness training is a big one to make sure your employees, as well as you as leaders of your organization, know the risks. But then there are a bunch of simple things you can do. Two-factor authentication is a critical piece. Making sure you use a VPN, not use public Wi-Fi if you're out at a conference like this or in a coffee shop. And make sure you have a safe second copy of all your data. You've got a safe backup so that if something does happen, if you do get ransomware, you have that safe second copy to go back to.
Our workshop today deals with Lloyd's of London. Lloyd's of London is a marketplace for insurance, and they provide surplus lines coverage, which is coverage that admitted companies cannot do.
And what kind of a situation is Louisiana in right now vis-a-vis them?
Louisiana is one of the top 5 states in the country in terms of surplus lines and importance to Lloyd's and the Lloyd's market.
What are the trends right now in Louisiana?
As the petrochemical industry grows, so do the needs for surplus lines coverage.
What recommendations do you have for Louisiana?
To continue growing economically and to expand in terms of petrochemical capacity and airports.